Hi, this is Vivian from PharmaSalon. Before you watch, I want to let you know that if you're interested in getting a CE credit for this video, go to the show notes below. There's a link to the Compounding CE website that will take you directly to the quiz for this class. The show notes also include the questions on the quiz, so be sure to check them out. While you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel.
Hello, this is Varsha Gaitonde, and I'm going to speak on essentially a copy guidelines for 503B facilities today. And a bit about my background, I am a pharmacist. I started my career in research pretty much and did a lot of gene splicing, carbohydrate chemistry, and basic chemistry at the beginning of my career. I then transitioned into hospital pharmacy, and I worked as a hospital pharmacist for many years, almost a decade. And after which I started in what was called batch compounding at that time, and it was not 503B yet. And as a batch compounding pharmacist, what we did was we made large batches that the hospital would make, and we were largely governed by 797. And that was all that was governing us. And we did have extended BUDs beyond 797, but we did not have GMP, and we did not do a lot of sterility testing or sterility assurance at that time. And then, of course, NACC happened. So then the FDA walked in, the federal government walked in and said that they're going to regulate us as 503B companies. And as 503B, we know that we have to follow CGMPs, and we also have to be very cognizant of everything else that we do. What are we selling to our patients? Are they safe? Are they effective? And the FDA maintains that since we do not go through an NDA or an ANDA, which requires a lot of clinical trials as well as CMC, which a 503B company does not do, we are held to a different standard, but still a very high standard compared to our batch compounding days. One of the things that has come out of this 503B is that essentially copy guidance. What the FDA maintains is that the FDA-approved drugs have gone through a clinical trial phase, or at least they have referenced clinical trials as part of an ANDA, and also that they have submitted certain items to the FDA to make sure that their products are safe and effective. 503B outsourcing facilities are exempt from that. That's why we have to make sure that we do not override our or overarch what we can do and go afoul of the essentially a copy guidance. So now to the guidance itself. What is essentially a copy guidance? These are our learning objectives for today. It's describe the decision tree in the guidance itself. Given the preparation, assess if the drug shortage exclusion applies. And given the preparation, assess if a clinical need exclusion applies. And we will go through those in the next part of my presentation. The decision tree, what is a drug shortage, and what is a clinical need exclusion. Now to the guidance. The actual guidance came out in January 2018. Since 2019, there have been several 483s issued for non-compliance with the guidance. And you can actually go into this FDA.gov drugs, human drug compounding, regulatory policy information webpage, and you can see several 483s that have been issued. And we can see that some of the 483s have observations which are pertaining to the essentially a copy guidance. And the guidance actually says compounded drug products that are essentially copies of approved drug products under Section 503B of the FDA&C Act. So all of this falls under our 503B section for outsourcing facilities. There is also, this guidance also applies in part to 503A, but most of it is applicable to 503B. Regulatory implications. Of course, an outsourcing facility must be in compliance since the guidance is part of a 503B, and so we have to be in compliance with essentially a copy guidance. There are also other implications because as I work with our hospital customers, the Joint Commission also comes in and asks the hospitals as to how they vet their 503B companies. And if their 503B partners run afoul of this guidance, what do they do? So hospitals do ask us this question. And actually, the JCO standards that came out in an ASHP publication actually does state this, that we actually do comply with the FDA. So this is part of our FDA compliance. ASHP has published a book saying meeting accreditation standards, and in that it actually says this here, exactly what we need to do as 503B outsourcers. Now to the actual guidance. The guidance is a large document, and I really like this decision tree, so I'm going to take you through the decision tree today. And basically what it says, what is an approved drug product? These are the key definitions. An approved drug means a drug product is approved under Section 505 and does not appear on the list described in subsection 503B(a)(4) of drugs that have been withdrawn or removed from the market. So basically what we can do is we can make any drug that is actually has an ANDA or NDA and which has not been withdrawn. And then after that, it's subject to this for essentially a copy guidance. So if something was withdrawn from the market because it was not safe or effective, no matter where it falls in this, we still cannot make it. We cannot compound it because it's not safe or effective. And if the compounded drug product is not considered identical or nearly identical under the first part, if you see in the margins here, it says Section 503B in parentheses D2A. At the bottom, it says D2B. So D2A is where we first evaluate our product against the commercially available product. And if it passes D2A, then we can go to D2B. That is what this has been taken straight from the guidance. It has to be evaluated first under D2A. Now we go to 503B section D2A. What does it say? Nearly or nearly identical. Is the compounded drug identical or nearly identical to an approved drug? Does the compounded drug product here have the same active ingredients, route of administration, strength, dosage form, or excipients as an approved drug? So does it have the same exact formulation as an approved drug? Now, what is an approved drug? An approved drug is something that appears in the Orange Book. You can consult the FDA Orange Book and find out if an approved drug exists for the drug that you're compounding. So what is identical or nearly identical under essentially a copy guidance? If your compounded product has the same active ingredients, route of administration, dosage form, dosage strength, and excipients as the product that is on the Orange Book, then you have essentially a copy on your hands. And as it says in the guidance, a compounded drug product that has all of these characteristics in common. So it could have one characteristic that is not right, that is not the same. For example, the dosage strength may be completely different. For example, something is available in only 1 milligram per mil, but your patients need 5 milligrams per mil. Then what you're compounding is not essentially a copy. The second thing is I would like to mention here is that container is not a distinguishing characteristic. So if you have a different container, that doesn't exclude you from being subject to this essentially a copy guidance and enforcement under it. Identical or nearly identical. What does dosage form and route of administration actually mean? Right? Dosage form is a way of identifying the drug in its physical form. And route of administration describes the way a drug is administered into the body. So I see many times there's a confusion both. So dosage form is a tablet. Route of administration is oral, for example. If the approved drug can be used by the same route of administration, regardless of labeling, we intend to treat the compounded drug as though it is the same route of administration. So for example, you can epinephrine can be, you buy it, it says intramuscular use only, but it can be used IV. So if you make a compounded drug product and say, oh, well, this is an IV product while we can only buy IM from the market, that is not going to fly because it can be used IV. And that is basically what the FDA says. And in the guidance itself, it says if the approved drug is an injectable drug sold in a vial that is labeled for intramuscular use, but this drug can be drawn from the vial by a smaller needle for subcutaneous administration, a compounded drug product sold in a similar vial and prescribed for subcutaneous use would be considered to have the same route of administration. So always know how it's used, not just what is on the label when you determine if your compounded product is an essential copy or not. Then we come to strength. Strength refers to the amount of drug substance contained in, delivered, or deliverable from a drug product. And this is taken directly from the FDA Orange Book. What is strength? First is total quantity of drug substance in a dosage unit or container. For example, if you have a 1 milligram vial and you have 1 milligram syringe, they're identical. Also, the concentration of drug substance in mass or units. So if you have a 1 milligram per mil, 5 ml vial that you can buy commercially, but you're making a 1 milligram per mil, 3 ml syringe, you're not excluded from being essentially a copy. That is not a route that you should be taking. It is essentially a copy, and you should only make it if the 5 ml vial is on shortage. Now we come to excipients. Excipients are inactive ingredients. They can be preservatives, dyes, flavorings. In some cases, information about excipients is not publicly available. So FDA does not intend to consider whether it has the same excipient based based on the labeling. So you have to only go by the excipients that are on the label of the product. And that doesn't mean just the label on the vial, it means all labeling, including the package insert. So if the excipients in the package insert are the same as the excipients you have in your compounded product, then yes, you have essentially a copy. Now we come to our questions. An outsourcing facility compounds a hydromorphone 1 mg per ml syringe, both from API powder and a sterile sourced vial. Hydromorphone 1 mg per ml syringe is available commercially, and hydromorphone is not on the FDA drug shortage list. So what would you think? Could you make it or could you not make it now? Because 1 mg per ml is available in a vial form. The syringes made from either source are not essentially a copy of the commercial product. Syringes made from both sources are essentially a copy. Syringes made from API powder are essentially a copy, or the syringes made from sterile source vials are essentially a copy. Which source could you use and not run afoul of the essentially a copy guidance? I'll give you a few minutes to answer the question. And the answer is B. Syringes made from both sources are essentially a copy. As you can see, if you go through, the strength is the same, the excipients are the same, because we don't really know. Hydromorphone does not come with any other excipients, it's just hydromorphone that is dissolved in normal saline. Then if you look at everything else, when you go back, and I'm going to go back a few slides and explain. Active ingredients are the same, route of administration is the same, strength is the same, dosage form is the same, and excipients are the same. So no matter what you make from, even if you make from sterile source or API, it is still essentially a copy. Now to go to the next part of this decision tree. Before that, I would like to talk about what is happening if you actually take the vial and put it in a syringe. If the vial is actually, if you do it 1:1, take the vial and just put it in a syringe, it goes under repackaging guidance. As we know, we can repackage directly from vials into a syringe. But what if you take a 50 mg per ml concentrated hydromorphone, or 5 mg per ml concentrated hydromorphone, and dilute it to 1 mg per ml? Is that still essentially a copy? And FDA has not weighed in on that. They still are finalizing that portion of the guidance. And in 2020, they said that this was what they were going to come up with. They are, when you start with the approved drug rather than a bulk drug substance, FDA plans to address these comments in upcoming revision to the guidance. The agency also intends to address compounding from approved drugs in revisions to its guidance for pharmacy and physician compounders. So the second part will apply to 503As as well. So stay tuned. FDA has not come up with any additional codicils to the guidance, so we will wait and see what happens. The agency does not consider a compounded drug produced by an outsourcing facility to be essentially a copy if it's identical or nearly identical to an FDA-approved drug that is on the FDA's drug shortage list. So that I will talk about the drug shortage list a little bit later. But the first portion is something we still don't know anything about. And as of now, the FDA will still consider it as essentially a copy.
Varsha, thanks. I know you said that you attended the FDA. Was it a listening session or a conference?
Yes, I did. And we had, FDA actually has a compounding Center of Quality of Excellence, and they have session. They have had 2 sessions to date, and they have it generally every 6 months or every year. And they are very informational. I encourage everybody to attend those. And even in that session, when they were asking the question of starting with an approved drug substance to make a compounded preparation, the FDA asked us to stay tuned. They will come up with the guidance shortly.
Okay. Did they say about when? I mean, or is it just to stay tuned?
Stay tuned. I mean, they still haven't told us the time. They still haven't. We'll see.
Do you have any anticipation or any idea of the changes that they're going to make, or is it you're just waiting to see?
We are waiting to see, but it looks like this is a question that has been asked by many outsourcing facilities. So we are not alone. Everybody has been asking those questions. And I do think that the FDA requires time, basically because of the pandemic. They've had to come up with several other guidances to keep pace with the pandemic. And so this has been on the back burner. It will come up once the pandemic subsides and we'll get a guidance. Okay. Next slide. So now we are back to our decision tree. We have completed the first part of it, number one. And if we answer yes to this number one here, what happens next? We go to the drug shortage list. So let me talk a little bit more about the drug shortage list now. Here it is. The drug shortage list, if the compounded drug is identical or nearly identical to an approved drug, is it on the FDA's drug shortage list? So now your hydromorphone 1 mg per mil, is it on the drug shortage list at this time is the next question you have to ask. And where do you know about drug shortages? This is the URL. FDA does keep it current, so you can actually go look at this drug shortage list on the FDA website. What is the drug shortage list? The shortage information on the drug shortage list is submitted by manufacturers. It is not reported by practitioners. No, it is not like our ASHP drug shortages list, wherein pharmacists actually can go in and say, this, we are experiencing shortage of, say, diltiazem at this time. That is not what is on the FDA drug shortage list. It is actually shortages that is submitted by manufacturers. And ASHP actually has a very good publication that actually tells you what is the difference. So I encourage you to go look at it. It is sorted by drug molecule and dosage form. And remember, the nearly identical is specific to the dosage form. So you can actually go into the drug shortage list, type in your drug molecule, hydromorphone, for example, and then it comes up with a huge list of hydromorphone products that are drug shortage. You can export it to Excel and then sort it by the dosage form that you are manufacturing. If you're making an oral dosage form or an injectable, you can sort it, and then you know if the item you're actually making is on the drug shortage list or if it's not. For example, viscous lidocaine is on shortage, but injectable lidocaine is not, then only the topical compounded preparations will be considered to be on shortage, not the injectables. The injectables are available, so you should not be compounding them. Now a question on drug shortages. An outsourcing facility compounds morphine 1 mg per mil syringes from API powder. These are available commercially in the same presentation. However, morphine is currently on the drug shortage list and the syringes are on back order. Would you be able to make it from API powder is the question. The syringes are not essentially a copy, so you can make them. Syringes are always essentially a copy regardless of the drug shortages list. Syringes are not essentially a copy so long as there's a clinical need for morphine. Morphine is a controlled substance and therefore must not be sourced from API. I'll give you a few minutes to answer this question. Okay, the syringes are not essentially a copy. As you can see from the guidance, and I'll go back again, drug shortages list. If you answer yes, they are on drug shortage, then they are not essentially a copy. You can make it from either source. They will still not be considered essentially a copy because morphine is the actual presentation is on back order and we need it for our patients. Section 503B was actually created so that we could bridge the gap between drug manufacturing and hospitals. So this is actually a situation that we should be making morphine syringes in order to help our patients. The last one, morphine is a controlled substance. I would really like to talk a bit more about this. The FDA guidance nowhere mentions any controlled substances or any distinction between controlled substances or non-controlled substances. So that should never be a factor in deciding whether it's an essentially a copy. We need to consider all of that when we actually perform operations in terms of the DEA and everything else. But in terms of the essentially a copy guidance, it does not matter if the item you compound is controlled substance or not. Now, some more about the drug shortages list. Under Section 503B D2A, the compounded drug is not essentially a copy if the drug appears on the FDA's drug shortage list at the time of compounding, distribution, and dispensing. So it all depends. If it was on drug shortage a year ago, that doesn't mean it's still on drug shortage. So you have to consult the FDA drug shortages website at the time you're compounding. It cannot be consulted like once a month. I mean, you should be consulting it daily or at least twice a week to see what is on drug shortage and what is not. FDA does recognize that there may be circumstances when the drug is in shortage when we compound the drug, but it's resolved before we ship it or before we distribute it. So it does say in the guidance that the FDA does not intend to take action for filling orders that it received before the drug went off of shortage. And provided the drug also appeared in the FDA drug shortage list within 60 days of distributing or dispensing the drug. So basically, you need to follow when the drug went off of shortage. And when it went off, if it went off of shortage today, then you have to mark your calendar for 60 days after today to make sure that after 60 days, you do not ship it out, you do not distribute it. So that is where it actually says explicitly in the guidance that you have 60 days. But that doesn't mean you continue manufacturing till the day 59 and intend to ship it on day 60. You should stop making it once you know that it is essentially a copy and it's off shortage. We go back to the second part of the guidance. It's 503B 2B, the B portion of this. Let us say that we answered no to the first part. It is not identical or nearly identical. I'm making a hydromorphone 5 mg per ml, and it's not available in 5 mg per ml. So I don't need to worry about the first portion of it. The active ingredient is the same, but the strength is not the same. So the first portion is not applicable. So here we go down no. So what happens if we answer no? Can we just continue making it from any source? That is not true. We have to, once we complete our analysis of the first portion and we figure out that it's a no, we still need to vet our product with the second part of the guidance to make sure we don't run afoul of the second portion of it. So what is the second part of this decision tree? This is 503B T2B. It is about bulk drug substances. Is the bulk drug substance a compound? Is the component of bulk drug substance that's also a bulk drug substance of something that is in a commercial product? If you answer yes, then you have to go through 4 and you have to figure out a clinical difference. The first portion is, for example, if you're making lidocaine and you buy bulk drug substance lidocaine, well, that lidocaine is also a part of something that is sold commercially. So your answer is yes. There are very, very few instances when the answer would be a no, where it's not commercially available. So here it is first, right? Is the component of the compounded drug product a bulk drug substance that is also a component of an approved drug? An approved drug is actually under 505C, and you can actually go to the Orange Book to see if it is indeed approved. If you, for example, type lidocaine or hydromorphone or morphine in Orange Book, you will get an injectable that contains morphine. So pretty much we have it. FDA does not intend to take action if it fills orders for a compounded drug that's essentially a copy that has been discontinued and is no longer marketed. So if certain drug products are discontinued by manufacturers and are no longer available, then we can compound it. However, it should not have been removed from the market for safety or efficacy reasons. So here's an example. FDA requested that all manufacturers of bacitracin voluntarily withdraw their product. And this was because they said that there was no reason to make bacitracin. It provided no benefit. And if that is the case, we should not be making bacitracin for injection either, because the FDA has requested the manufacturers to withdraw it from the market as well. So there is no reason for us to compound it. But if it was removed for other reasons, for example, if the company just decided not to make bacitracin, it was not because of any FDA action, then if our physicians require bacitracin, we could be able to compound it and not run afoul of this guidance. So then we come to the part 4, clinical difference or clinical need. This is where I get most of my questions from practitioners, from hospitals, because they believe that a clinical need statement is like a prescription. If I write for it, you can fill it. And that is not the case. I mean, just because a hospital or a physician says, okay, I need this compound, that doesn't mean we can just make it. We really have to go through this decision tree and decide for ourselves if there's indeed a clinical need or clinical difference. And the FDA actually has given us guidelines as to how to determine that clinical need or clinical difference. Here it is. A compounded drug product is essentially a copy if a component of the compounded drug product is a bulk drug substance that is also a component of the approved drug, unless there is a change that produces for an individual patient a clinical difference as determined by the prescribing practitioner between the compounded drug and the comparable approved drug. So basically, it doesn't mean that a doctor can write a prescription and you can just compound it. Doctor has to tell you what is the difference. If I buy it from the market, this is what it will do to my patient. That's why I need you to compound so that my patient will not be harmed. What is the actual clinical difference that it makes from your compounded drug compared to the commercially available drug? If an outsourcing facility intends to rely on such a determination, then facility should ensure that the determination is noted on this prescription or order. And for 503Bs, it's not a prescription, so it's an order that is placed, which it may be patient-specific prescription or a non-patient specific order for a compounded drug, which means every time a hospital orders, they must document that this is a clinical need and they need it for this to satisfy this clinical need for these patients. And FDA does recognize that they can't, at the time of placing a 503B batch order, they're not going to know what the difference will be for an individual patient, but definitely they should know that it does and document that it does make a difference to a certain subset of patients. Again, who can document the clinical need or clinical difference? The pharmacy manager can order the compounded drug from an outsourcing facility and document that the compounded drug will only be administered to patients for whom the prescriber determines that there will be a clinical difference. So for example, if something preservative-free is ordered for pediatric patients, then definitely the pharmacy manager can order it and say, we need this for our pediatric patients. It does not have a physician who is attending the pediatric patients. The pharmacy manager can make the determination. And this is a question I get from many hospitals because they wonder if physicians should sign the order. But the guidance itself says a physician does not have to, as long as it's documented that the physician decided that there's a clinical need. FDA does not believe that a particular format is needed for an order for office stock, which is basically what we do, which is not a patient-specific order, as long as it clearly identifies the relevant change and the clinical difference that the change will produce for patients. For example, let's say it's preservative-free. It is required because the preservatives can cause allergic reactions. It has to clearly identify the relevant change that your formulation brings in. And it is dependent on us. The outsourcing facilities must document this. The onus is not on the pharmacy to document it, but the onus is for us to make sure that they have put that clinical need statement in before we fill the order. An order that only identifies the product formulation without more information would not be sufficient to make this determination, and that's also clearly stated in the guidance. So definitely make sure that we have it on documented on file for each order that is placed. Now a question on clinical difference. An outsourcing facility compounds preservative-free rocuronium from API powder. Rocuronium is available in preservative-free form commercially, and it's not in drug shortage. The facility asks you to check a box, and as this is a hospital pharmacist that is making the determination now, right? If you're the hospital pharmacist, and the outsourcing facility says, check a box on the website stating that there is a clinical need. And if you check the box, you get your order. If you don't get your order. So what would you do? Would you actually check the box? Should you? So here it is. The product can be sourced commercially, and hence there's no clinical need. The product is only available in vials, hence there's a clinical need for the product in syringes. It is a responsibility of the outsourcing facility to determine clinical need. So if they state there's a clinical need, it's okay to check the box. Just believe them, right? And D, the box can only be checked by an OR physician. I'll give you a few minutes. And here's the answer. And I will explain why the other answers are not correct. The product is only available in vials, hence there's a clinical need for the product in syringes. That may be true. However, the outsourcing facility can buy the product in vials and repackage it into syringes. There's no clinical need for them to compound it from API. As you can see, the first portion is still is not satisfied, right? The first, essentially a copy A, it's available in vials. How can you make it from an API? You cannot. So that's the first thing. If the outsourcing facility just compounded it from the vials itself and repackaged them, then it would not fall under this guidance. They are free to repackage it. And there's another guidance called the repackaging guidance for outsourcing facilities, which I encourage you to read. The second portion is the product is only available in vials, hence it's a clinical need for the product in syringes. Yes, I explained that. Is the responsibility of the outsourcing facility to determine clinical need? No, it's not. So if if the outsourcing facility says, okay, check the box, the pharmacy should still determine whether there's a clinical need or not. It shouldn't be, there's no clinical need for this product. The box can only be checked by an OR physician. Well, the pharmacy manager can check the box. That's for an outsourcing facility order. Now we come to the record keeping part. What is the guidance itself says keep records for at least 3 years. And it's very important that we keep the records not only to demonstrate compliance, but also for to understand what constituted a clinical need or not. We also should know when a product went off of back order. If we compounded something because it was in shortage, then we must really make sure that the product was on shortage when we compounded it and we followed the 60-day rule. If we didn't follow the 60-day rule, the FDA could tell us, well, why did you do this? Why did you compound this? That's the first thing that I would do. I would encourage you to keep records for 3 years, but also look at the drug shortage list, reevaluate what you're making, and is it essentially a copy every week or at least every 2 weeks? Because FDA drug shortages, it's very dynamic. Things come off of shortage very quickly. Just now, I think in June or July, methadone came off of drug shortage. So you cannot make methadone from API anymore because it's no longer a drug shortage. And those are the small things that we have to keep in mind and make sure that we track all the drug shortages. Secondly, we should also track what is coming on market, because certain things that were not on market could now be on market, and certain things can go off of market too. So always monitor the orange book and make sure that you know what is coming on, what are the new products that have been introduced, and some of the products that have been discontinued, like some hospital discontinued PCA vials. They were making the pre-packed PCA vials of morphine, and they no longer make them. And so that is something that can be made now by outsourcing facilities, basically because it's not available commercially. So whatever goes off of commercial distribution can be made now by outsourcing facilities. That does not mean we can make it from API. We can definitely compound them though, because they are not identical. And the root of the dosage form is a PCA vial. It's really completely different from what a syringe would be. A hospital cannot use those syringes in their PCA machine. So there can be some sort of understanding as to why it's not the same dosage form, even though the route of administration is the same. The second thing is there are new products that come on the market. Many BD and Fresenius Kabi actually are coming up with many syringes, prepackaged syringes. So always make sure that you know what is coming to the market and that you're not making something that's an essential copy of something that's being put on the market at this time. Order records of a prescriber's determination of clinical difference. This should be maintained. They should be maintained in real time and tagged to each order that is placed. Because remember, the guidance says it has to be for each order. So definitely we should keep a record of that. And if the outsourcing facility compounded a drug that is identical or nearly identical that appeared on the FDA's drug shortage list, we should maintain documentation regarding the status of the drug on FDA's drug shortage list at the time of compounding, distribution, and dispensing. So even if you stop compounding, if you keep distributing beyond your 60 days, then you should really not be doing that. So there should be some sort of gate in your system to prevent distribution after 60 days. So those record keeping requirements are very important, because when the FDA comes in, they will ask you as to how long, when did you stop distributing, and you should have a date, and it should be easily retrievable, saying that, okay, this is the last date we shipped this product that was made from API. So that's it. We didn't make it after that because it went off of drug shortage. And those are the things that are very important, will be very important to maintain when the FDA comes visiting. And the FDA inspections have been slowed down because of COVID-19, but they will come someday, right? And so if they come after 2 years and you don't have all records, that's going to be a problem. So make sure you have the records, but you have a system to maintain them. That takes me to the next slide. And this is a recap. Under Section 503B(a)(5), a compounded drug product must not be essentially a copy of one or more approved drug products. Again, one or more is bolded in the guidance, so that's something that we have to know. It can be a copy, it is not a copy of one, it's a copy of two drug products. It doesn't matter. As long as it's essentially a copy of one or more drug products, you are running afoul of the guidance. Products that are on FDA's drug shortage list may be compounded during the time period they are on the shortages list. They can be dispensed and shipped within 60 days of the product being on the list. So that's it. After 60 days, we should not be shipping or distributing them. And clear documentation of the clinical difference must be maintained for each order as determined by the prescribing practitioner. Again, you cannot, as an outsourcing facility, you are not allowed to make the clinical difference. The prescribing practitioner or the pharmacy manager for the hospital that's ordering should be able to make that determination of the clinical difference.
Thank you so much. That was great. I just wanted to back up a minute to record keeping. Do you have any examples or stories of, or something that was within your experience? Like what have you seen happen?
I have seen the FDA actually did come in, and last time we were in an FDA inspection, the FDA did ask us for actual documentation of when something went on shortage and when something came off of shortage. And one thing that is with the FDA website is that it's a clean slate. If something comes off of shortage, it tells you when it was off shortage, and then eventually you won't see it on the FDA shortages website. When it's resolved, it maintains that on the website for a little while. And so if you don't print out the screenshots, then you don't know. I mean, you have to actually print it out and attach it to your documentation to say that, okay, this was a drug shortage at this time, and that's why we compounded it. In 3 years, it is no longer available on the FDA website, and you don't know whether it was on shortage or not, or at least you don't have the documentation from the FDA website for it. So it's very important that you print it out and you maintain that documentation. And in my facility, actually, we do a reassessment. We have pharmacists that do the reassessment every 2 weeks, and we scour anything that, any new products that come on the market. We look at the Orange Book constantly. We also look at the FDA drug shortage list constantly to make sure we keep in touch with what is happening. And we don't get blindsided by something that went off of drug shortage, and then we are still compounding it, thinking that it's on drug shortage. And we cannot rely on the hospitals to do that for us, because again, that is not in their realm. And if they are ordering something from you, it's really difficult for them to pivot now and start getting it from, say, McKesson or Cardinal. So it's very important that we also tell them that, okay, this went off of drug shortage. In 60 days, we won't be able to supply this to you. So we have to make sure that they understand and they know so that they can plan as well. So those are the things that I feel in documentation moves this too, because if we know at day one that it went off of drug shortage, we can actually help our hospitals and recognize that, okay, 60 days later, we are not going to get this product shipped to us. What can we do? What do we do to help our patients to make sure that we don't have a supply chain interruption? So that's where we come in record keeping.
Oh, there
that's the end. And yeah. And I don't know if the beer is essentially a copy if you make it in the same concentration as the commercially available ones, but here I am. But you can make hand sanitizers.
Thank you for watching. Remember, if you would like ACPE credit for this lecture, click on the link below and register for the class. You won't have to watch the video again, just answer the quiz questions. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can be updated on all our latest content.